Israel was, at the flick of a switch, able to turn off the supplies of water, of electricity.
Why didn't they develop their own water?
The aggressive expansion of settlements since October the 7th. It is indefensible, it is illegal, and in my estimation, it is a war crime.
There's no occupation.
She said there's no occupation.
Is it justified?
Of course, what justified?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel. I just watched Norman Finkelstein, a Jewish-American pro-Palestinian activist, debate a demonic Israeli spokeswoman by the name of Fleur Hassan on Piers Morgan Show. It was actually really disturbing to hear this woman glorify the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. She even went as far as to justify Palestinians being displaced, starved and eliminated. This poor excuse of a woman not only shocked Norman Finkelstein with her level of sadistic depravity, she also disgusted Piers Morgan to the point that he even said she was blatantly supporting war crimes. Let's take a look.
Gaza's just been flattened. It is an utter devastation. What happens? Gaza's done, isn't it? I mean, what happens to these people?
Well, no, I actually think they have an incredible opportunity. Under hospitals, they built those tunnels, they built booby traps. There's
but
like
that's 20 years ago, all right?
Well, no, they've spent 20
years
turning the whole of Gaza into one booby trap for this Armageddon moment.
But that's not an answer to my question.
The answer is what happens now?
Wait, what happens to 1.9 million people who've been sent to refugee camps that have now been attacked as well? What happens to these people? A lot of their homes are just gone.
To be clear, the refugee camps, there are safe spaces where Hamas also infiltrate, and they put their own people. They use them as human shields, as we know, as has been reported, and they put their people in harm's way.
Where is their safe?
What happens now?
If
you ask me where the light is?
Yeah, on that one point you just said, though, where are they supposed to go to be safe? Right now, where do Gazans go?
Mr. Finkelstein said that we're engaged in a genocide. If we were, why are we asking people to get out of the way?
Let me ask you again. Where can they go?
Why are we giving warning? Why are we damaging our own element of surprise? Why are we doing that?
My question was, where should the Gazan civilians go to be safe?
The Gazan civilians today have an opportunity after Hamas
No, that's not my question.
That has subjugated them to rebuild their society.
That wasn't my question. My question is, where can they currently go to be safe?
To the safe spaces that Israel has assigned, where Israel is not attacking.
Where?
Well, it depends where.
Yes, but the other argument is that Israel is indiscriminately attacking everywhere and then saying, you know what, Hamas are there. And because no journalists are allowed in to verify this, because the IDF won't let them, there is no independent way of verifying whether any of that is true. What happens at the end of this war?
So I believe that there's a real opportunity for the Gazans, for the good Gazans who want a decent life for themselves and not living a life of terrorism, to rebuild.
How?
Under the maybe civil administration of their own local leaders.
Where do they go and live when all their homes have been destroyed?
With their own local leaders, with Saudis, with Emiratis who know how to build quickly, who have the resources to build quickly. If we really have a consortium of countries, like the Abraham Accord countries, that can get together and rebuild, there is an opportunity.
But still under Israel control?
I don't think Israel should be controlling them.
So Israel would back off completely?
We have to retain security control so we don't have another massacre.
So you would have control. Okay.
But not administrative control.
Well, you just said you have control.
But eventually we don't have to have any control.
You know what? Eventually it'd be really nice, actually, if Israel had no control.
Piers asked the Israeli spokeswoman 7 or 8 times where the Palestinians should go in their own country to be safe from Israel. And each time, all she did was deflect and use propaganda slogans like Hamas tunnels and human shields to justify airstrikes on hospitals and refugee camps that Israel themselves had said were safe zones before bombing them anyway. When Piers Morgan is calling someone out on the Israeli side on how extreme they are, then you know there is something very wrong with that person, as Piers is normally quite lenient with Zionists. Morgan not only acknowledged that Gaza had been flattened, he even rubbished this woman's talk of tunnels by saying that was 20 years ago. And each time he asked her what will happen to the Palestinians when this is all over, this maniac of a woman repeated the same sadistic answer, stating this is an incredible opportunity for the Palestinians to rebuild. I mean, it doesn't get much lower than spinning Israel's genocidal actions as somehow moral. Losing your home, your belongings, in a lot of cases your limbs, your family members, that is if you're still alive yourself, is evidence of a complete lack of opportunity. How is losing everything you know and love an opportunity of any sort? It's going to take decades to just remove the rubble in Gaza. There is no opportunity left there. And when Piers pointed out to his Israeli guest that there's nowhere to go for displaced Palestinians because Israel is bombing all locations indiscriminately, using the excuse that Hamas is everywhere, everywhere. Even though there is no way of verifying these claims because Israel don't allow journalists in, all the Israeli spokeswoman could muster up as an answer was, it just depends where Israel is not bombing on a particular day. This is how much they value Palestinian life. She said, it just depends. That is evil personified. She also said that the Saudis and the Emiratis should be in charge of rebuilding Palestine after Israel has destroyed it. Saudi Arabia and the UAE should be ashamed of themselves. They should have been defending Palestine from the start, not rebuilding it after it has been destroyed as if they're Israel's lackeys. This is how docile these Muslim nations have been throughout this genocide, that Israel feels comfortable throwing their name around as if they are their minions. They could have at least sanctioned Israel or stopped trading with them, but no, they did nothing. And Piers, to his credit, posed a valid question. He asked, during this rebuilding process, would Palestine still be under Israel's control? And despite this woman's attempts to deflect as usual, she made the damning admission that Israel would continue to enslave the Palestinians, which even Piers was repelled by. Let's watch the next clip.
You said Israel is in the war with Hamas.
Yes.
So has the other guest in this room.
Yeah.
Why are you shooting children in the skull and in the chest? The New York Times published an article on that, came under a lot of flack because they published that article. They said we can't refute the evidence. We have the x-rays in front of us. Why are you killing journalists? Why are you killing medics? Why are you killing UN workers? If you're engaged in the war with Hamas, why is it that Human Rights Watch just this past week put out a report? They tell people where to flee. They say, go to the safe zones. Human Rights Watch says when the people are directed, they're being shot at the road. When you get to the safe areas, Israel drops 2,000-pound bombs on them.
I've made that very point.
Does that sound like a war?
No,
or does that sound like a genocide?
It's horrendous that UN workers, journalists, children, women have all been killed. They say it's collateral damage as they've gone after terrorists.
When you shoot a child,
here's my question, Norman.
When you shoot
Norman,
a
here's my
child
question.
in the skull, that's
Norman,
not collateral
can
damage.
you tell Norman's gone as far as I've heard him do in effectively saying it was a justified attack and Israel has no right to defend
self-defense.
itself.
But of course he's going to say that because he doesn't believe Israel has a right to exist.
Can
He
you show
doesn't
me
believe Israel
can you
has
show
a
me
right to
document where I
exist.
said
Could
that?
you let me answer my
I've
question?
written 10 books.
He
Show me
doesn't
where I
believe
said that.
Israel has
Show me
the
where
right
Has he
to
ever
exist.
said that?
If
Show me
Israel,
where I said
Has he
that.
ever said that?
My question is this.
Well, you just said he said that.
Yes,
If
show me
Israel
where I
doesn't
said
have
that.
the right to self-defense,
Show me where I said
then
that.
it doesn't have the right to exist.
He's never said that.
Where did I say Israel had no right to exist? Show me.
I think you should answer him because you have said it as a fact.
If you believe that Israel doesn't have the right of self-defense, you are basically saying that Israel doesn't have the right to exist.
No, I never.
Yes, you do.
There's no connection.
So
You can't defend yourself against concentration camp
If he
inmates.
keeps interrupting me.
Why would your island called a huge concentration camp? Why? 2004.
I don't speak for him.
Hey, you could just Google
2004.
it. Yes.
We left in 2005.
In your imagination,
Excuse me.
you left. According to the International
this
Committee
man-
of the Red Cross, you didn't
Yes,
leave.
we know how neutral they are.
According to Human Rights Watch, you didn't leave.
We know how neutral they are.
According to Amnesty International,
We know how neutral.
There can be no doubt that even if Israel says we unilaterally pulled out in 2005 and withdrew troops and so on to the border or whatever, there's no doubt that Israel continued to exercise a form of occupying control. And we saw that very clearly after October the 7th, when Israel was, at the flick of a switch, able to turn off the supplies of water, of electricity.
Why didn't they develop their own water
No, but here's my
infrastructure?
question for you, Fleur.
Why didn't they use
Here's
the
my
money
question
to
for you.
develop their own electricity?
Here's my question for you.
Why?
Here's my question for you. Given that Israel had that power, you can dispute the word occupation, but they had a control over the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, which I don't think they should have had. What gives Israel the right to exercise that kind of power over the people of Gaza?
It wasn't over the people of Gaza. It
Well,
was
it was.
a terrorist entity.
Are you saying all Gazans are Hamas?
No.
Norman Finkelstein was right on the money when he said that both Piers Morgan and the Israeli spokeswoman market this genocide as Israel's war on Hamas. And if that really was the case, then why are kids being shot as well as journalists, medics and UN workers? And despite Norman citing human rights organisations and medical records to support his claims, Piers fell back on his usual collateral damage during a conflict nonsense. It seems Morgan was doing his usual flip-flop dance for ratings. I actually do think the extent of the Israeli spokeswoman's extremist views was too much for even him. I agree with Norman, shooting kids at point-blank range is not collateral damage. It's a despicably evil war crime. By now, it must be clear to all of you that Fleur Hassan is a pathological liar. Not only did she lie about Israel leaving Palestine in 2005, which Norman debunked by listing human rights organisations that say the exact opposite, she even accused Norman Finkelstein of not wanting Israel to exist, an assumption she plucked out of thin air. And when Norman and Piers both questioned her numerous times to explain her false claim, she resorted to deflecting and stuttering her way out of it as usual. Again, I agree with Norman Finkelstein. Israel is not exerting self-defence against the Palestinian inmates, as he put it. They are committing a genocide against them. Morgan also weighed in, saying that despite Israel claiming they left in 2005, they still shamelessly occupied and exercised control over Palestine. And he backed this up with the clear example of October 2023, where Israel was able to cut off the supply of food, water and energy in Palestine. In response, the Israeli spokeswoman desperately called every Palestinian an Islamic extremist, and when Piers pressed her on this bigoted statement, she simply backtracked and folded. Let's look at another clip of this wicked woman being caught lying whilst being humiliated in the process.
Israel prohibited chocolate from entering Gaza. That's why Israel prohibited baby chicks
But I don't agree with any of this.
Gaza.
I agree with you.
That's why
He's twisting
wrong.
the reality.
Israel-
Actually, that is the reality.
It's not.
Israel was doing
Yes,
that.
it
It
is.
wasn't all they were restricting.
Piers, we finally agree on more than we disagree. I'm glad about
Listen,
that.
you'd be surprised. Honestly, I have a lot of sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians. You know what I think? Palestinians should be entitled to the exact same human rights as you.
In Norman Finkelstein world, Islamism is not a problem. Political Islam is not a
Let Norman
problem.
respond.
Under international law, the settlements are illegal. Each and every one, you referred to the building of new settlements as being appalling. No, under international law, confirmed in the July decision of the International Court of Justice, all the settlements are illegal. Israel's position has been it will not return to the June 1967 border. That's in breach of international law. Israel says it will not leave East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. It belongs to the Palestinian people.
What I don't think anyone can argue, Israeli or Palestinian, since the start of this war on October the 7th, 8th, is that the aggressive expansion of settlements on the West Bank by Israelis since the start of this war, in my estimation, has not just been outrageous, I think it actually constitutes an indisputable war crime. What are they doing?
You don't understand what was actually
I
advanced.
think
I've
he
literally,
understands.
sorry.
I think he understands.
I've literally specifically asked you about
I'm going to answer.
the aggressive expansion of settlements since October the 7th. It is indefensible, it is illegal, and in my estimation, it is a war crime. Now, we know that's happening because we can see it. We can see it. What we can't see in Gaza is anything because the journalists aren't allowed in. What do you think of the aggressive expansion of settlements on the West Bank since the war started?
I reject the premise of that, and I'll tell you why.
But you think it's fine?
Let me ask you a question.
Do you support the
But she said
expansion? I've had Jewish guests who have
She said
condemned
there's
it.
no occupation.
There's no occupation.
She said there's no
Because at
occupation.
beginning-
Do you think these expansions are fine?
I want to answer the question.
Are they justified?
I want to answer the
Well, yes or
question.
no?
Oslo.
Give me a yes or no.
Split.
I'm not interested in Oslo.
Oslo split. No, because the whole premise of
I'm
your
asking you a simple question, Fleur.
You,
Has the expansion of settlements in the West Bank since the start of this war been justified, yes or no?
94%
Yes or no?
of Palestinians
Yes or no?
are living under their own autonomy
Yes or no, Fleur?
in Judea
Yes or
and
no?
Samaria.
Is it justified?
What do you mean?
Is it justified?
Of course, we're justified. We are building communities. There are communities
You're
in Judea and
forcing
Samaria.
people out of their homes
Nobody's been forced out of their homes.
illegally.
Have you ever looked at Area
International
C?
law says you're breaking the law. I got to say, Fleur, your total refusal to accept anything in terms of the settlements since October 7th on the West Bank is
let me
wrong.
ask you a question.
I just find it
Why
outrageous.
was there terrorism before 1967?
I'm not going back to
If
67.
all of, no, I am.
I'm talking about the
because
last year.
Because you're talking about territory that
These
was
settlements expansions in the
legitimately.
last 15
You're
months have
talking
been
about.
totally wrong.
It was horrible to hear Norman Finkelstein speak about Israel denying basic comforts like chocolate or pets to be allowed into Palestine, which despite his Israeli opponent's continued denial, Piers also confirmed to be true. Did you catch how this awful woman even resorted resorted to blaming what she called Islamism, which is a new term I've not heard before, and political Islam for Israel's attacks on Palestine. This lady is a far-right bigot. It's ironic that a Zionist whose whole ideology, which is based upon politicized Judaism, would speak about the weaponization of another religion, whilst ignoring the fact she and her government are blatantly using their own faith to commit war crimes. Look at the stark contrast between her, a deranged supremacist, and Norman Finkelstein, a regular Jewish person, and it's clear who the extremist is. As Norman said, all of Israel's illegal settlements in Palestine throughout history, as well as the expansion of their allocated border and their occupation of East Jerusalem, is in direct violation of international law. But even if we put the historic stuff aside for a minute and just look at what Israel has done over the last year, as Piers highlighted, the fact is Israel has illegally seized more Palestinian land over the past year than over the past 20 years combined, which Morgan correctly called a war crime. Predictably, the Israeli spokeswoman denied there ever was an occupation, despite there currently being around 700,000 settlers living in around 300 illegal settlements across the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Piers pressed this woman on whether she thought this was justified. In fact, after he described the theft of homes and land as undefendable and illegal, he asked her 14 times before he got an answer, and her answer was, yes, Israel's theft, killing and oppression was justified, which actually makes me sick to my stomach. Let's look at the last clip.
My big issue with Gaza is not that your characterization is necessarily wrong. It's that we as Western media don't know because we're not allowed in there. And my big problem with the IDF, and I'll get a response from you, Fleur, on this, is the IDF's refusal to let independent Western journalists in to verify what they're doing and to report fairly and freely, I think is very telling and increasingly damning.
You say the problem is that Israel is, or a problem is that Israel isn't admitting journalists.
Yeah.
And you correctly said it's fair for a fair-minded person to infer from that fact.
Yeah, so they're hiding something.
They're excellent.
Yeah.
They're hiding something.
No question.
It would be better if we had journalists there. But really, at this point, journalistic coverage would be superfluous. We have all of these international respected organizations, many of them headed by Americans, when they all charge that Israel is using starvation as a
Norman,
weapon.
I have four children,
Yeah.
and they come home singing songs, one day we'll have peace. And you know what they
And
teach
you know
them
what
in the
else they're
Palestinian?
saying? You know what
Gee,
else
let
they're
me
saying?
finish.
They sing
The
death
very
to the
rude,
Arabs.
he's not let me answer
They also
any
sing
question.
death to the Arabs.
That's not true.
Even when
You
they go
do
to
not live
foreign
in Israel.
countries,
You have
even
not
when
been
they
to
go
Israel.
Amsterdam,
And I don't know how long.
They sing death to the Arabs.
He's wrong.
Even in
In
Amsterdam,
Israel-
they sing death to the Arabs. In fact, even in Amsterdam, they sang, you know why there are no
Again,
more schools
the abused
in Gaza?
wife, he's justifying
because there
a
are no
pogrom.
more children in
The
Gaza.
abused wife is justifying
That's
a
what they were chanting
pogrom.
in Amsterdam.
He's justifying the pogrom.
Again, when Piers Morgan is calling out Israel's corruption, you know they've sunk to a new low nobody thought was possible. And although Norman validated Piers' claim that Israel's ban stopping the Western media from entering Palestine shows they have something to hide, which I agree with, I don't think it would matter as the mainstream media is run by Zionists and their sympathisers. We all see the videos online every day for the last 14 months. There is enough to report on already without even going there, yet the media choose to ignore it. And as Norman said, US-led human rights organisations have already reported numerous war crimes, such as starvation, torture and other forms of violence, and fatal violence, which once again the media largely ignore, or worse, they report it in Israel's favour. The Israeli spokeswoman's final feeble attempt to paint Israel as the good guys by shamelessly using her privileged kids singing about freedom, as she put it, was crushed by Norman Finkelstein when he again simply spoke facts regarding the genocidal songs we all heard Israelis sing about Arabs and Palestinian children when they were in Amsterdam. And all the Sahih could respond with was a false accusation of anti-Semitism, which is a usual coping mechanism used by these vampires to shift blame when they're completely exposed and cornered. Credit to Norman Finkelstein and even Piers Morgan for calling this lady out on her BS and her embarrassingly transparent lies justifying genocidal war crimes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honour our Palestinian brothers, sisters and children by bringing these evildoers to justice. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group via the link in the description, where we as Muslims can speak freely and without censorship about issues like this. And remember to like, subscribe and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.